when there's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fist at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game, gonna crack down, and shut down, the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
Well, that kind of fell off a cliff. Melissa David. I promised. I said I would start with Melissa David, so I'm starting with Melissa David. Melissa David. That's how we're starting the show. Brent Krahn is here, and the reason I'm starting with Melissa David is I am in so much trouble.
Uh-oh.
I had one job.
And you failed.
And I failed it.
Uh-oh.
I was supposed to introduce you to the executive director of Parachutes for Pets because they want you to be an ambassador.
Yes.
And I gave her the wrong number. So she could not understand why you were not responding. And it, in fact, made some very outlandish claims, quite honestly.
Right.
Which I knew not to be true. And then I said, let me get at the bottom of this. And then I gave you her number, which miraculously worked the first time. And as a result, I believe you are now taking a tour of the new advocacy center on Thursday.
Sure am.
And I was at a staff meeting this morning where I was told that it was mandatory for me to start today's show because you were going to be on by saying Melissa David.
I appreciate the fact that you are publicly giving me your apology.
No.
Because I felt like I was doing something wrong.
No, it turned out it was me.
And it turned out it was you. And not very often do I get to say that to somebody that, hey, it was actually your fault. Because usually it's like, oh, yes, of course.
No, I don't believe that.
Yeah, well,
I don't believe that to be true.
Well, fair enough. You're a good man. You're
the good man. And I hopefully have I better turn off the ringer because she might call during the show. We don't want that. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for doing this.
You bet.
It's not that long ago that you were here, but it's also very timely that you're back because we are sitting in this nexus of all kinds of corresponding streams of consciousness and things going on that I need to pick your brain about.
Well, that's good.
When last we spoke, the Calgary Flames were looking for a general manager. The Calgary Flames now have a general manager, Craig Conroy, former teammate of yours, one might say.
One might say. And you know what? And we kind of knew. I mean, that was the pick, right?
We knew or we hoped?
Hoped. I if you were going to ask me if I were to bet, I would have bet, but it wouldn't have not have been a substantial sum where I would have been left.
Would not have been the house and everything that went with it.
I was hoping for it because I think this is what it's like Batman. It's not what's the saying? Never mind. I lost it. But we need him. We need a guy like Craig Conroy with his positivity, his hockey IQ, his humility. We need all that in Calgary to build a team that supports its players, that gives them the ability to be creative on the backside of that, also being accountable for the mistakes that they make and work hard and work as a unit. And I do believe that Connie has done everything he can up to this point in reiterating that, and his decisions moving forward, obviously bringing in Dave Nonis to help him out with a bunch of stuff, and coach is still unnamed.
Have you crossed paths with Nonis before at any point?
Never. No, ever. No.
That one was odd to me in the sense of it wasn't something that jumped out at me, and it was not, I mean, Craig's got a Rolodex, I guess we don't say Rolodex anymore, but Craig's phone is full of contacts, and I have no doubt that Dave Nonis was one of them. I was a little bit surprised to hear that, yet seems very complimentary to what they're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, it didn't cross my mind either, and I just assumed that being the guy that he is, if he, Nonis has been around a while, and believing what I hear, that come in and help negotiate contracts and support Craig in any manner, Nonis being the guy? Sure, why not? If that's what they want to do, that was not that didn't catch me off guard, but I wasn't also thinking he was the guy. Oh, well, that's a no-brainer for Nonis. It makes no sense to me, but in the same breath, these guys know what they're doing, and Craig obviously wants them there.
Were you surprised by anything that had come out in the media conferences and stories subsequently around Craig? I mean, I to your point, I think we were all thinking he was the right choice. They make the decision. He's the choice. He said the right things. Unfortunately, it's kind of wait a month here before he can really, start to put his fingerprints on this team.
Yeah. And
I guess got to hire a coach,
but right. I mean,
right.
there's obviously all the reports are leaning towards internal candidates, but you just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is surprising when you ask people about Craig Conroy being the general manager. I have not met one person. I have not spoken to one person right away saying, "Oh, it's a bad idea. Why would they have hired a guy that's been, first of all, speaking on his merit, been in an organization for 12 years after having a great NHL career."
Yep.
To be in one organization, to learn the business for 12 years. Everybody brings up the fact that you got to pay your dues, and there are some guys that are just good enough not to pay their dues, or the opportunity presents itself sooner, and they get to learn along the way. And for a guy like Craig Conroy, he's been patient, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so good on him, because there's not, loyalty is hard to find, right?
Yeah.
And especially in pro sports where nobody needs to be loyal to you. When you're playing the game and you feel like you're loyal to the organization that's paying you. Obviously, you got to perform in order for that to happen. But it's a painful lesson too when you're not performing and you're just kind of at the end of your rope. They just cut you loose, say next. So when it's on the player or a guy like Craig after his season to just learn, put in the time. And so he's done all of that, right? So that checks that box. Amazing. Because I don't know how many guys would do that, right? And then you go to the players and they get interviewed about, what do you think about Craig Conroy? There's not a bad word said about the guy.
Yeah.
Not one. From his character to his hockey IQ to the way he communicates. I mean, everybody knows how infectious his personality is, how positive he is. Well, let's not confuse that with not being competitive, because the guy's nuts when it comes to winning, right?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the one thing that I've kind of have felt that I've had. I don't know why I feel this way, but I kind of feel like I have to say the dog's got some bite.
Yeah, for sure. And when you describe a guy, it's like, oh, he's a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how does that help you being a general manager in the National Hockey League or whatever? The first thing he says, oh, he's a great person. He's great, but being a good guy, we've seen a lot of jerks over the years, do incredibly well too, right? So what does him being a good guy have to do with it, right? You can work on the flip side. I've played for a lot of good guys before that can't command a room or can't communicate. You kind of look at him more as a friend. You don't take him seriously.
Yeah.
For a guy like Craig, I think he'll be able to find that balance. He's been around long enough. He has professional relationships with players. He supports them, much like a Brad Treliving too, right? Where Brad has got good relationships with players. Obviously, not everybody can get along. That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
But I think Craig, great. He's a great guy. Great. Who cares? The guy knows what he's doing. And you know what? If he stumbles out of the gate too, or things he's got perseverance. He works hard. He's been around a long time, and the guy will be able to figure it out. And if he needs any help, he's like the thing I always bring up about him is his humility, right? Like, you can be very good at something, and you have to know when you're not good at something. And I think he's got one of those, that humility to him, where if he struggles in an area, he will go for help. He will not be afraid to say, hey, I don't know what to do here. Hey, what do you think? What's going on? Right. And that's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of intelligence. And I think that's what Craig will bring to the table.
I am fascinated too by, he is from the Brad Treliving School. I mean, he worked under Brad for 9 years. There's a lot of similarities. Like, they're very both, real character, personable guys that, lots of us have relationships with. They build relationships. This is not like your coach where you're going from a hard ass coach to a player's coach.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities between the guy he's replacing and Craig.
Absolutely. And there's trust too, even if it's bad news, that you get the right story, right? Hey, you know what? We think you're a tremendous hockey player, but you don't have the right fit for the organization, whoever that may be. That's not something that you'd have to figure out, right? That's something that would be communicated to you. And Brad was good at that too, that if it didn't work, he was upfront and honest and cared about the player. And it's not always what you want to hear, but there's been so many guys I've played with over the years that they don't know where they stand within organizations. And and it's the message is delivered in such a way where, you know, just work hard and see what happens type thing. I think that there's the passion for the individual, right? There's a passion for the player, and obviously the success of the organization is paramount, and it's at the forefront. But in order to do that, you have to get buy-in from people. And if you're going to sit down with Craig Conroy and you're just, you know, 17-year-old kid getting ready for the draft, what's going to happen? What are we doing? You sit down with Craig, he'll be able to give you a good indication of what players that the Flames are looking for, depending on where you are in the draft, or if you're a free agent, or how you fit in. And if we want you, he'll pursue you. And there'll be that buy-in. You know what I mean? I always talk about too, with playing in Canada is difficult. I mean, the two major markets, Montreal, Toronto, I mean, there are a certain type of people that want to be there. Most don't, but there is a lot of hype around there. You got the Vancouver. It's a nice place to live.
Mm-hmm.
But then you got the Ottawas, the Winnipegs. I mean, Calgary, not so much in that group, but even Edmonton, you know, they have McDavid and obviously that new building, and Draisaitl on that new building up north there. But it takes a little bit more to get players to come up here now too, even with, right? It's not just, hey, you got, we're playing in Texas. It's tax-free. There's no state tax, or Florida or whatever, Vegas. Come down here, you get to live down, you get to go golfing all year round. The weather's nice. You know, people don't know your name, 4 blocks from the rink. You have a bit of anonymity here. Doesn't matter if you're from wherever, you know, and you show up and you're playing your first, people know who you are. You go to restaurants downtown. Hey, you know, you were -3 last night, buddy. What's going on?
Yep.
Right. And so to attract people to come to Calgary is having a guy like Craig Conroy being an ambassador, plus holding the position he has. It's an attractive combination I see for him to try to attract maybe potentially some free agents over here too.
Yeah, again, it's beginning to become old news. I mean, he's in Buffalo right now, I believe, at the Combine, and the word is from Elliot Friedman and other insiders, they're beginning to, you know, thin down the list of coaches. And I do want to get to coaches in a second, but there's a specific reason why I want to delay the coach conversation, because it's actually might be the big theme here this afternoon for you and I. Skipping ahead, did you watch game 1?
I did.
You did, eh?
Yeah.
What's the attraction for you? The delay didn't kill you, obviously.
No, it didn't. I'm cheering for Vegas.
Because you played there as a Wrangler?
Not even close.
Okay.
You know, yeah, there are 0 ties to that organization.
Yeah.
I think Matt Tkachuk is an attractive player. He's a player you love to hate when you play against him. He's a personality. He makes it. Did I say Matt?
Yeah,
that's right. Right.
Yeah,
I was getting confused. Matt, Daniel. You remember Daniel?
Yeah, but Matt. Yeah. Oh, I remember Daniel Tkachuk.
Right.
Yes, we do here. We're the only stop that does. But yes, we remember him.
You know, and so you got. I'm sorry. I'm going to get back to why I'm cheering for Vegas in a second. But you got Tkachuk in the final. He's been having a tremendous playoff. You got Bobrovsky on a bit of a tear, but he's only played 15 games too. Let's keep in mind, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So people are getting kind of lost in his Bobrovsky spiel. I get it.
Yeah.
I think Vegas, I'd love to see Vegas win, simply because it would be, you know, they were the first team, pro sports team in Vegas, right?
Yes.
And if they could bring a championship to the Vegas, I would love to see what that looks like, with a bunch of guys that are kind of doing it by committee. They've been through 4 goaltenders this year too, which I appreciate.
Is it 4 or more?
Or maybe 4 minimum, right?
I'm
probably
I think
missing.
they've been through almost 4 in the playoffs, but yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And you sit there, and then obviously Aiden Hill, Calgary guy, he's playing out of his mind. And that paddle save he made at the beginning of the second period Saturday night, I didn't even believe it was in. Cousins, when he redirected the puck, his blades were turned to go celebrate with his buddies, and then he had to readjust them, because it's like, what is going on here? How did this not go in?
Did you ever make one of those?
I did, but it did not at a hard to believe, but not at a time like that.
No, it's not hard to believe. You went to a Calder Cup final.
But you make those saves. I did, and it's crazy, because, you know, you're so caught up in the moment, it doesn't even matter. Like, you don't even think, wow, that was a great save. Wow, I'm awesome. Wow, it just, none of that even crosses.
You don't have time to think, wow, I'm awesome.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
You don't have time to pat yourself on the back with that, when you can appreciate it after the fact. But when you make those saves, like, my God, I stopped it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now I got to scramble and get back in.
So, and thanks to the guys for showing us the save here. Are you, because let's be perfectly blunt here and have a goalie conversation. He's out of position.
100%. But on that play, though, too, there's not a chance for him to be in position, right?
Okay,
Like,
that's fair.
right?
But he is out of position.
1,000,000%. And
Okay.
he had to adjust, right? The pass
Right.
is coming from his blocker side to his glove side. You think he's going to one time, it passes it back door. It's a tap in.
So if that goes a couple of inches over and slides into the net, is he getting blown up in the
Nope.
next day?
Not at all.
Okay.
Everything happens so quick.
Okay.
In tight, right? And for him just to have the I mean, first of all, let's not kid ourselves. It's luck, right? I mean, a save like that is
no,
is not
absolutely.
based on any type of skill whatsoever.
That's a Hail Mary throwing yourself backwards.
Right. It's a desperation save. You don't give up on the puck until it's across the goal line. Having said that, you see the athleticism in his body to be able to change direction that fast. His body's sliding left, then he's moving his upper body right to fall back and drop his stick down.
Mhm.
I mean, 9.9 times out of 10 that goes in the net. But at this particular time, I think Braden Holtby made one of those.
Well, that was the social post. It was almost not 5 years to the day, but 5 years since Holtby did that, right? Against who?
The Vegas Golden Knights.
Right.
And so you sit there and it's like, wow, you kind of the stars are
lining.
And when you make that type of save and you look at how calm Hill has been. I mean, he came in the Oilers series where there was no pressure on him. He just had to come in there. Brissois gets
against the two best offensive players of this day and age, right?
Yeah. Comes in and whole hum. I'm just gonna go there and go about my business. And then he played like he's playing now, and he got more confidence throughout the Dallas series.
Mm-hmm.
They get up to a 3-0 lead, and Dallas Ottinger wasn't fantastic, and Hill outplayed him though. Right, which doesn't matter. You got to outplay your competition.
All that matters.
That's all that matters. And now I mean, and Hill's only played 12 games, right? Where Bobrovsky's played 15. I think it's how the playoffs have worked out with injuries and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not tired.
Mm-hmm.
And you're coming into now you got 3 more wins and you win a Stanley. It's hard. You can't think like that. You got to think 1 more win and we're up. And then you kind of got to work your way incrementally. But he is such an easy person to cheer for.
Sure.
And he is basically one of the main reasons why I'm cheering.
Did you ever bump into him in a camp?
Never.
Calgary kid. He never did David's camp when you were.
I don't even remember. I would help out Dave a little bit, but I wasn't full time. What I do know was the fact that he's a member out of Carmody, I think, down.
Of course, the golf part, sure.
Yeah,
the goaltending, no,
right,
but the golf part, yeah.
And I'm as you know, I'm not much of a golfer.
No,
no. But I got
hole in one. What?
Oh, you know what? But that wasn't skill involved. That was my
Hail
Mary
save. You just talked
save.
about that save. It's the same thing
for sure. It hit about 3 rocks, a tree, and skipped on some water and went in the net.
That's right.
Or the whatever, the hole,
that little net in the hole,
whatever.
Yeah.
And the guys that don't know him but know who he is, and he's out there, and even the people that work at the golf course say what a good guy he is.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And everybody wants a piece, and everybody will want a piece of him now. If it
doesn't
matter,
absolutely,
if they win or if they don't, everybody will want a piece of him now.
Yeah.
But I think he's phenomenal. I'm cheering for him 100%.
So you're taking Vegas.
I am.
You made up a really good point about the first, major league team there. There was AAA ball and there was the UNLV Running Rebels. You could make a case we're professional in the 80s, but that's neither here nor there. What staggers me is that we are not that far removed from this being the biggest joke in the world. Are you kidding me? They're going to put a team in Vegas. This is the dumbest thing. Who do they think they are? Like, that idea was poo-pooed from pillar to post.
Yes.
And I don't hear a whole lot of people going mea culpa, because now what are we looking at? We're looking at an NHL team, an NFL team, a Major League Baseball team, and you can be damn sure that if the NBA expands, they're going there.
For sure. And it's not like they're having trouble filling the seats. Like, I've never been to a game, so I'm not speaking on firsthand experience. Everybody that I know that's been to one says outside of the game too, just the amount of entertainment that you get with how they promote it internally.
I was watching that too. Did you see they do the nights and on this?
Oh yeah, the beginning,
I feel a little sheepish about this, and let me tell you why. Let me admit my guilt to you. Commie. People forget Mike Commodore briefly played for the Ottawa Senators.
Yes.
He played in that year in which they went to the playoffs and 300 was a big thing. And they got the oiled up gladiator to go out and give the big speech on the ice. And I still think that's one of the silliest things I've ever seen. Yet I'm cool if they want to fight dragons in Vegas, right? Like,
I know, but there's so much to it. Plus, I mean, if the product sucks, it's tough. It's a tough sell.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they've been they've been a pretty good team since their inception.
But the inception is the part that I struggle with. I do. And I understand it. I fully get it. You could not bring another expansion franchise in the NHL and let them flounder like they did in Atlanta, Nashville. You might even say in a way, Columbus really hasn't recovered yet, right? And I get that. But I think there's a book to be written about that being the most incredible opportunity ever handed to an expansion franchise in terms of talent.
They got quite the break.
I think they did. And I don't think Seattle got it better
get the same,
than everybody else, but not the same.
No, agreed. And they wanted that to succeed.
Yeah.
Right. And I wasn't paying attention to it at the start, but all of a sudden you start seeing these free agents, they're getting the players they're picking up. And wow, like usually I think, when like Minnesota and Columbus came into the league, I think that was the year 2000.
Yep.
I mean, they were garbage.
Right?
San Jose comes in the league, it was terrible. Ottawa, bad.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Right. You knew that if you were an expansion team, you were destined to be garbage for 5 years.
Right.
Right. That was the
easily
deal.
The Panthers in 3 years made it, but they made it on the back of John Van Beesbrook and a bunch of good young kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Agreed. But that didn't really translate to any future success.
No, it was a one and done. And then they got rolled by Colorado.
Right.
Right.
Or ticket sales or nothing.
Yeah.
Nobody was like, wow, we got to go watch the Panthers play.
Yeah.
You weren't winning over a market down there. But Vegas, I mean, yes, they were afforded a leg up, and they've good on them for being able to.
Oh no, and I'm not. I'm not suggesting they should have done the honorable thing. It sucked. That's not what I'm saying at all. I don't know. It's
tough to swallow.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit. But and then I got the Tkachuk factor on. I like Matt.
I do too. I think he's great for the game.
Yeah,
I like what he's doing.
Yeah,
he walks the line. And can you imagine being his line mate if you don't have a pulse, or if you're trying to just kind of fly under the radar?
Yes, because we saw variations of it for 6 years.
Exactly, right? Where you got to be pulled into the game every night, and Tkachuk's going to be in there face washing and spraying snow and scoring overtime winners. And I'm sure he'll be fine. But that little, back when I played, we're going to talk.
We are going to talk about this. Absolutely,
we're going to talk about the old time machine, because there was 2 instances in that game Saturday night where these little floater sauce passes up the middle just get cut off, and it led to a shorthanded goal going one way, the first goal for Florida, and then
by a former teammate of yours,
Eric Stahl.
Right? Did you see the picture on social?
No, I didn't.
Somebody put former Lowell Lock Monster great Eric Stahl in his jersey, and the first guy I thought of was you.
That's awesome, because it's so funny. I was watching the game with my wife, and she's like, "Is that Eric Stahl?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "He's still playing?" I'm like, "Yes."
Does that mean something to you? The guys that you skated with are still in the league. Does that keep you young?
No, I don't know what necessarily means. It makes me feel, I don't know. It's like it does. Yes. To answer your question, absolutely it does.
Yeah.
But I sit there and I was talking with a buddy of mine who played, who's a little bit older than myself. And I'm just saying, could you imagine being Eric Stahl right now playing in today's National Hockey League versus when we all started playing?
Yep.
Just like I had and this is just minor nitpicking stuff, but young guys would come up and they'd have different nicknames for Gatorade, and you're like, shut up. It's called Gatorade. It's not Gadesy, like settle down over there. Right. Like,
yeah, just give me some of the aid.
Yeah. It's like the little nuances of it. It's like, well, these new guys, we call it something different and we're all super cool. And it's like, I can't imagine being in a dressing room full of, early 20, mid 20-year-old guys. I think Stahl is 38 now, 39, sitting there and having to put up with that crap, but that's just real life.
That is the reality of the situation.
But guys that the very few that are still left, the 3 that come to mind are obviously Stahl, Jamie Benn, and Mark Giordano. I'm sure there's maybe one more out there. But you cheer for them. I know that Eric's won a Stanley Cup. Otherwise, I'd be cheering for him. But it's so much fun to watch, because look at me now. You couldn't tell I was an athlete.
Look at you now.
Right?
Well, but you've got the stories, man. You played with these guys. You got the perspective.
It's nuts. And I remember playing with Eric and how he was so talented. He was so competitive.
Yeah.
Great vision, awesome hockey IQ. And that team in Lowell was a really good hockey club. We had Chuck Obasu on the team. Obviously, Commodore was there. We had Colin Forbes, Chad LaRose, Cam Ward, right?
Yes.
Right. That lockout year was phenomenal, because the Providence Bruins run where they had Patrice Bergeron and oh man, I'm drawing a blank here for some of this stuff, but Philly had Jeff Carter and anyway, all these guys that are you're just like that league during the lockout, Manchester Monarchs had Mike Camilleri.
Mhm.
It was just the league itself was phenomenal, and it was
Yeah.
so much fun to play in because a lot of up and coming guys that at the time were like, hey, this guy's, this Patrice Bergeron guy, he's going to be something.
He'll be okay.
He'll be good.
He'll be
right?
good.
Pay attention to him. He's might, and if I could find the photo, I have a photo in the binder from some fan from Lowell that made me a binder of all the. She took pictures of all the.
She took the picture.
Yeah, and she put it into like a scrapbook and gave it to me. And then at that time, I was like, "Oh, thank you. This is great." And now I wish I could actually find it because it's like that's forever ago. That's almost 20 years ago.
I know.
And I have a picture of me stopping Bergeron on right when the shootout started to come out.
Oh yeah.
And I was completely out of position, and I made it was. I tell everybody I made.
Was the shootout part of, because there was a whole bunch of rule packages and testing that they did during the 04-05 AHL.
That was a trapezoid too behind the net.
Yeah, and they fattened the blue lines, right?
Yes, they did.
They fattened the blue lines. And did you have the camera? Remember they put the rail camera?
No.
Because I remember going and watching the Edmonton Roadrunners of the American Hockey League, and they had the rail camera. So they were testing a rail camera that would follow the play up and down, but it ruined like the first 10 rows in the most expensive seats, right? Because it was right in everybody's way.
Yeah. No, I never had that.
Oh, okay.
It was a trapezoid. I remember that. And they switched up the icing too. It went to a no-touch icing.
That's right.
If you got to the top of the circle, then it was okay. Whoever got to the top of the circle first, it's icing. Because I still played back when you had to go touch.
Did they not take out the red line in that? Was that part of the package, or did that come with the end of the lockout?
That came. No, they took the red line out even when I was playing junior.
Okay.
So that was, as far as I remember. Geez, now you're dating me here, but I think that's. I mean, another funny fact is I warmed up when I was playing for the Hitmen, still when they had separate warm-ups.
That's right.
Remember
yeah, you mentioned that last time you were here. Yeah.
And just stuff like that changes over the course of time.
So
awesome.
So speaking of change, Mike Babcock.
Yeah.
Looks like he's coming back to the National Hockey League. Looks like he's going to coach in Columbus after 4 or 5 years away. Was paid out a ridiculous amount of money by Toronto. Oh, I guess it wasn't 5. It was only 3 years ago. Geez, it felt longer than that. But pre-COVID and all of that. So he's gone. Now he's coming back. We just went through this exercise with Daryl Sutter this year, or the last couple of years. He moves on this year. I wanted to talk to you about the change of the player. We had a guest on Friday, he's a season ticket holder, and we went right up to the edge where he almost called the players woke and snowflakes. Didn't quite do it, but was hinting at that. You saw Rick Bell wrote a column in the Sun calling players snowflakes. And it got me thinking that, I talk about this all the time, that the player, I've seen the player change.
For sure.
You talked about the player change. Are you okay with the way things are going? Are we letting the player off the hook? Are we finally starting to be reasonable with the player? Are players woke now, whatever that means?
I complain about it a lot. I shake my head sometimes. I sit there and I'm like, my God, if one of you, had a spine or could stand up for yourself in a mature way, or like when I was 21, I just went out and did the best that I could, whether it showed on the ice, whether the results were there or not. I knew I was going to get not necessarily yelled at, but potentially singled out, held accountable. And the worst thing was being held accountable in front of your teammates when you knew it was your fault. And as an athlete, or even, as a person, when you screwed up.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if you're going to make that a big deal in front of everybody, it's embarrassing. So what are you going to do about it? And I always understood the fact that the coaches had a short window to get the results that they needed. And so a lot of them would rule. And fear is a very aggressive word. Fear is like he's not, he's sitting on, he's not hammering. But I know that if somebody needed to rattle my chain every once in a while to get me going, right? Like if you're playing well or things are struggling, but you're in a good spot and the guy's nice, sometimes you just need somebody to come and just rattle the tree a little bit, for right, wrong, and different. Just come wake you up a little bit, because you can get pretty set in your ways. I get frustrated with today's player because I don't know. I'm not in the dressing room anymore. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what level of communication there is, because I played on teams that there would be leaders on the team. A prime example would be a guy like Warren Peters.
Yep.
Not many Flames fans may remember him, may not.
I think, yes. I don't think a lot about Warren Peters, but I think about Warren Peters kind of often because what should have been.
Yes. And Warren Warren was a leader.
Yep.
Probably still is a leader.
Yep.
I remember being in certain situations with him. I played with him in Quad City. I played with him in Austin and Dallas's farm system. And he was one of those guys that Glenn Gulletson was a good coach.
Yep.
Glenn Gulletson was a player's coach. But I remember Warren being the intermediary between the two. I remember I'll never forget it. We played a Friday night in Chicago against the Wolves. I got pulled. This is Goalie's first year being the head coach of the Texas Stars. Saturday we go in, I think we play Grand Rapids or Milwaukee or something like that. And then Sunday we come back and play Chicago again at 2:30 in the afternoon. And after the game Saturday, so I got pulled Friday. Matt Clammy goes in Saturday. After the game, Glenn Gulletson says, "Hey, Krahn, you're going to start tomorrow against Chicago again. Be ready." And Warren Peters comes to me and goes, "Hey, Krahn," he goes, Gully came to me and he asked, what's his psychology? Can he battle back? Can he bounce back? I played for Gully in the coast for 14 games. That's not a sample size.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
And Warren said, "Yeah, he can." And so Warren came to me and says, "Hey, I told Gully, like, you're ready to go, and I believe you are." And I played against him in junior too. Like, I've known Warren for a long period of time.
Yep.
But he's like, "Hey, like, there's like I'm on the line here too, man.
Yep.
Like, we need you. We need you. Like, let's go here, right?"
Yep.
And he was one of those guys, as crusty as he was, and as good of friends as we were when we played. I never wanted to let a guy like that down.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
And I wasn't worried about the coach being mad at me. I was worried about my teammates being mad at me. I was worried about the leader being mad at me. So I just use Craig McDonald's another great example of that.
There's another guy.
Right.
Yep.
Where these guys were just, they should have been in the National Hockey League. Yep. They were leaders, but their value was almost being in the American League, getting guys ready. And they didn't get paid nearly enough for the crap that they had to put up with and be intense for all 72 games in the American League at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see with these guys, and they would pull you aside, and there would be a legitimate. I remember even some rookies in our team would say, Warren, he intimidates me.
Mm-hmm.
He intimidates, but he's your teammate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's not going to embarrass you in front of your teammates, but he's going to pull you aside.
Mm-hmm.
And and it was fair game too. There was lots of egos that you have to battle with, but it's fair game. It's like Warren's not pulling his weight. Somebody's gonna say, "Hey, let's go," right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what goes on nowadays. I just see the end result, and I just see a lot of the game is obviously a lot more fast. It's a lot more skilled. That's you can't argue that. There's a lot that people get away with too, right? And I think that
which people,
players, as far as sauce passes up the middle in game 1 of the Stanley Cup final, right?
I mean, previously mentioned,
right? You're going to give, and let me preface this by saying you're going to give Tkachuk the benefit of the doubt because he does so much good that those mistakes are going to happen,
right?
So that's not the issue. He knows that. No one needs to go and tell him, "Hey, what are you doing?"
No.
He knows.
Yeah.
But I think what's actually lacking is the fact that there's no leaders anymore, as far as in the dressing room. There's leaders as far as work ethic because nobody wants to make things uncomfortable. I think you hear stories of Backlund this year going up and having conversations with Daryl. But I don't know what a leader looks like on a team. Now, to me, the leader looks like he's blocking shots and working hard and he fights through a separated shoulder and he's missing teeth. And those are guys, those are your heart and soul guys, but because they work hard. You want to, obviously, you can be a leader, but you need a guy that can be that buffer between the coach and the team.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there are many guys left that can do it. That's not a very coveted job. No, there's not a lot of guys that want that. They want to make their money. They want to score their goals. They want to do their interviews. They want to wear their fancy hats to a hockey game. I don't know. I mean, and maybe I could be dated in saying all this stuff.
Fancy hats.
I don't know. There's like fashion. People show up in fashion. I want to wear this suit, and they
always. Oh, yeah. Okay, now I do understand.
You know completely. What I mean? Like, there's a bit more of a brand.
That part is silly.
Yeah,
that part is silly. Yeah.
And like I said, I'm only 41, but I feel like a bit of a dinosaur when I watch these guys because I would just sit there and the whole. It to me, it's just the accountability of not only on the ice but kind of off the ice stuff.
Yeah.
And that's just. Times have changed, and so now you gotta. That's the way she goes.
See, but I don't buy that times have changed. I think there's two separate things at work here, and I'm fascinated by where we got with you right here because I spend a lot of time worrying about leadership and I think that's the greatest gift that sport can give. But why is it not showing up? Because are we removing that? Are we taking that out? Are we not allowing? Are we over controlling our players? Are we not allowing for mistakes? Are we? There's a million reasons. What I wanted to get to, Brent, with you was knowing what we know now about mental health. Do you feel 20 years ago as a junior, 22 years ago as a junior, as a young pro, as a guy who now has to make a determination, am I staying with an organization or I'm going somewhere else? Do you feel that your mental health was taken care of? Do you feel that you were put in positions that you should not have been at the expense of your mental health?
You know what? That's a very good question.
Thank you.
And I will,
every once in a while
you come up with one. Hey?
Yeah.
And tell you what, being a first round draft pick, I put the world on my
you sure
shoulders,
did.
and I felt like a failure from start to finish, essentially. Right. And I'm not, don't say anything. I'm not bringing my small violin out here, but I sat there and thought, this is, you know what? The Flames have put their trust in me to be their goaltender of the future.
Mm-hmm.
And how am I going to achieve that? And
Mm-hmm.
I was playing hockey up until that point because I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there and I'm just like, you know what? Well, you know what? I'll be worth it. And I went to my first training camp and didn't do great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Don Hay was the head coach and Mike Vernon was goalie there. And you know, the year I went back to junior, had a bunch of injuries, knee injuries. And you know what? I had tremendous amount of support from Craig Button, from Lanny McDonald was around, from Morris Boyer, the training staff, Rich Hesketh. All these guys were just, they were in my corner for the whole time.
Yep.
You know, Daryl was great too. Like I was injured and Daryl, I remember going to Seattle.
Daryl Sutter.
Yes.
Yeah, I know this.
Yeah.
No, but I want people to understand where this conversation is going. Yeah.
You know, when I sit there and you know, Daryl was great and
Yep.
kind of laid expectations. And the thing is, like, I think the expectation's the big thing. So, you know, Ian McKenzie, the old head scout for the Flames back in the day, he told me kind of my progression, and I didn't hit one of those key targets whatsoever, ever. Right? Injuries get in the way, timing was wrong, whatever. And I remember getting to the American League after my lockout year in Lowell,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, full disclosure, you know, Cam Ward and I played in the lockout year together, and it was awesome. It was one of my favorite years of playing goal because I loved Cam. I thought he was awesome. He was a great guy.
Yeah.
Unbelievable goaltender. And I love playing because every time he would play, he would be lights out. And I knew I had to be lights out. I think we each got 6 shutouts. He played more games, but
he pushed.
Yeah, well, yeah,
in a friendly competition.
Yeah, 100%. You know, when it's like after the games, we were happy for each other. We wanted, like, oh no, I got to be better. You know, it was great.
Mm-hmm.
Get to Lowell, and I get a chance, or I get to Omaha and get to be a chance to be number 1 goaltender.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan McGill's head coach. I get pulled my very first game in Chicago, or against Chicago. I get sent down from the Flames. I wanted to play on the Flames that year.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, who doesn't? Don't get me wrong. That's
the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
And I stuck around to the end of camp, and then they sent me down, and I just see Cam in Carolina. I'm like, you know what? Like, I want that. You know, and you start playing your little violin, like, oh, what woe is me? Why did that happen to me? And get pulled my first game, boom. And I played the next game against Iowa. We won 1-0. And boom, right like that. Like right, I got in not trouble, but I got the old horse eye from Ryan McGill. Like, hey, the season started yesterday. Where are you? Go play the next game. And Gilly was extremely hard for me to play for the first half of the season.
Yep.
Awful. I mentally, I was so worried about other people's opinion. I wanted to do good. I wanted not necessarily compliment, but I wanted to know that my teammates would be proud of me. They'd be happy with my performance and my coaching staff.
Yep.
I remember Tom Webster coming down, and I was saying, Krahn, what do we got to do to get you to the next level? You know what? I had my opinion. So, well, give me a chance. You know, throw me in, whatever.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, just the old cheeky nonsense.
Yeah.
And it was always there, you know, and the support was there the whole time. I mean, Daryl would come down, watch a game, and I'd be crap, you know, and I get the old look from him too. And at the end of the year, I remember, midway through the season, Ryan McGill came to me and he's like, hey, you need to get going, and you are going to play every game now until we're out of the playoffs. And I think I played 19 in a row, or 19 of 21 games.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never done that before. Never. And I was terrified. And I always thought I needed a break. I always thought, you know, because I'm like, oh, you know, if I'm good, keep putting me in. If I'm bad, take me out. I was never playing through adversity. And he was the very first guy on the ice that would just stick with it. And he would give me the business. I remember him standing on the bench yelling at me in front of 8 fans in Omaha. And I'm sitting there, and I think we were playing Peoria, and guys came by. I was like, what's going on here? And I would just sit, and at the time, it took a lot. It took a lot out of me. And then when he came to me in February and I played, I just not transformed, but just kind of got used to it. Like if you got to be able to take a certain amount.
Yeah.
Right. It's not for free. Nobody's there to say, hey, they want you to succeed for the business aspect, the winning.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is an end game. They don't really care about you per se. They do, but you have to win.
Yes.
They have to get you to a certain spot. And of course they care, but just because they're mad at you doesn't mean that they don't care.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a fine line because you have to treat players with people with this. Before it was a blanket, you would find the most liked guy on the team and you would rip on him because you knew that the whole team around would be like, that is BS.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go to bat for that guy because we love him.
Yep.
And that was the way it went. Start the next season. I remember going into Ryan McGill's office and I'm like, I'm harder on myself than you are. And blah, blah, blah. We kind of had a conversation about it. And he goes to me, I was just waiting for you to grow a spine, man. Like you're a good, like he complimented me from start to finish. He's like, you just need to believe in yourself. And just because somebody's hard on you, just because I'm hard on you, doesn't mean I don't think you're a good goalie. And I'm not going to compliment you every time you make a save because that's your job, right? Like your job is to stop the puck. Your job is to win games.
Yep.
So if I'm going to compliment you every time you do that, the bar is pretty low.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You're in professional sports. And it took me so long to figure that out because all I did was internalize everything and make it about me. It's like, well, why is he mean to me? What's happening? Why is he not talking to me? Why is he upset?
Yep.
There's a million things
Yep.
that go on in life. And yes, you play for guys that just don't get it and they're mean. But you have to be able to have that internal confidence, which hardly anybody has. You have to learn as you go. And I would always admire the guys that had a bit of an edge.
Right.
So to answer your question, I had all the mental health support I could ever have dreamed of in the Flames organization, in the Dallas Stars organization. But I didn't realize that until couple years down the road, right? And so I think now you got to treat Tim different than Bob and Bob different than Jerry, and I get it because different things make different guys work.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into that and you're so worried about everybody else, you kind of lose focus of the team.
Yep.
And I think that's what happens now as well. Okay, you know what? This guy only needs to eat pancakes in the morning. Everybody's got to eat pancakes as we need him going. And for a lot of the guys that have been around for a while, it's like, you walk in and say, hey, this is ridiculous. Like, we're a team here. We need to get going. We need you.
Yep. People
can take accountability as a personal offense and they start working against each other. I just question sometimes the people, the backbone that people have, because a lot of these players coming up too have been the best at everything the whole way through and nobody's really throwing a challenge at them to begin with. Right?
Why?
Well, because you want them on your team. Every time, when you're starting from minor hockey to midget to whatever, it's like, well, we need the best player. We need the best player. We need to accommodate the best player. And it's not wrong because there's so many options for these guys.
So we're not allowing them to fail.
No.
So when they get up here and
there's adversity, there's a hurdle.
Right. They don't know how to process it.
Well, and then
because they've been.
Yeah. And then a coach comes to you and says, hey, you're like this. Have you played hockey before? Like, you're on a team here, buddy. There's like, get the puck to Barkov or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Let's go here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It takes a while. It takes a while for guys to process that. And everything happens so fast. You're so young. I mean, the players are so young. I remember growing up watching, guys like Eric Lindros and John LeClaire and, the guys that would look like men, I mean, they were just big and heavy. And you watch highlights of hockey in the 90s and it's hooking and holding and face washing. And, it's a different game. But now, I mean, I have the good fortune of running into a lot of players that are obviously just starting their career, and they're great shape.
Mm-hmm.
They're just robots, like they're conditioned to be this. They're conditioned to eat this. They don't do this. This. Here's my set of rules, and you don't break that mold, right? And the good ones do. I think the top tier guys, but. There's such a mold for players, and it's such a short window to make a lot of money and fame if that's your goal.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of like I said, once again, I'm not in the dressing room every day, so I can't say this without any objection. But there's not a lot of farm kids that'll go in there and or whatever, small town guys or big city guys with a big heart that's got a spine that can just come in there and tip a garbage can over and rattle a few trees without it being the coach. I think everybody's kind of more concerned about just maintaining a friendship and being nice to everybody. And hopefully we can all just, as long as we play Xbox together and we're good buddies, we'll come together. But sometimes you learn so much more when you get into arguments.
Right. No, I again, this is why I want to have the conversation. I did not have a preconditioned outcome for this conversation. I saw Mike Babcock's name.
Yeah.
And I saw kind of the sphincter around the NHL tightened up.
Yeah.
We just went through the process with Darryl and you know how uncomfortable it was and you know how much it split the locker room. So you asked the question, have we moved past this? Is that style? Because you said something was really interesting to me, and I've heard it a million times, and it was absolutely I don't care if you're a hard ass coach or a player's coach, they all used it. Pick the popular guy, go after him, get everybody to rally around him. That's as old as time.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Should it be? Should it be?
No. It shouldn't, because you get tired of kicking the garbage can. And if the coach is the one that's leading the team the whole time, your team is going to suck, right? The best teams I played on were basically coaching themselves by February, March.
Yep.
And there was an internal accountability,
right,
that you didn't want to drop the ball on that one. And basically the coach was there to keep you on track and put you through the pregame skate and do the practice, but the coach would be coming to the captain saying, "Hey, you know, like, what do we need? What do we need this week?
Right.
What do we need?
Right.
Or, hey, you know what? How's Bob's ankle? Or you know, hey, so and so is struggling a little bit. What's going on here?" The pulse is just, you need that pulse guy, and a little calling guys out kind of shows what you're made of too, though, a little bit, right? It's, you can go out there and
as a player,
yeah, and it doesn't have to be a shouting match, it doesn't have to be it's just, you know, hey, you know, we need a save, Brent. We need a save. I'll even in preseason, we were playing against the Blues and we're tied 2-2, and I let in 2 bad goals, and Mike Ribeiro stands up and, "Croner, we're out playing St. Louis. We need you to be the difference in this third period." But preseason, I'm a nobody. I'm not even making the team.
Yeah.
They know, like, there's nothing on the line for Ribeiro. There's nothing on the line. They're going to be on the team regardless. We need a save. We need a save.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, you're 100% right, because I'm thinking the same thing. But now you've told everybody. Now I better be on. Internally, I can try to, well, maybe, you know, if they thought it went off somebody's skate, or, and I'm not saying that's the case.
Yeah.
But guys, pay attention.
Yeah.
And it's good to air your grievances, and it's good to be direct with your teammates, because it shows respect, I think.
Okay. Could you play for a Carla McLeod, who we've watched for the last 2 years very publicly coaching Czechia, and very publicly has shown how she's, you know, kind of broken down and invested in the players and inspired the players, and, you know, gave them their roles and gave them their pats on the back. It's very much a complete different approach than what we've seen traditionally at the NHL level. Could you play for a coach like that?
Sure, I could. I know.
But doesn't that put a lot of responsibility back on you then?
Yeah, it does. But are you gonna get called out for it? You know what I mean? Like
I think you're held accountable. I think she holds her players accountable.
Yeah. I just know how I was wired, and you leave me alone, sure, great, and it was fine. But I always needed somebody to come in and just kind of, just like I said, shake the tree. I think today's player, you have that. There's different styles for different players. That style works too. I would imagine people could adapt to it, but there has to be an accountability measure there somewhere, regardless.
Yep.
You're going to give the player just enough rope to hang himself with, and say, "Hey, you know what? It's up to you. This is my that you have to lay the expectation out, though, right?" A lot of people fail that part. They just come in and expect you to, you know, you're this is the system we're playing. You're the third line guy. Blah blah blah. Well, what do you want to see from me?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And that part gets missed. But yeah, you can play for more than one style of coach, but you have to have that honesty, that transparency, and that trust.
Were you ever referred to or considered a new type of player? Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, we're kind and there's a place I'm going here, and something a place we ended up last week, actually. And, you know, it's funny when you're talking about how these players, you know, they're so young and everything. And I was thinking of the first NHL. We had the old NHL hockey book, the coffee table book that was probably written in 71. There might have been a picture of an LA King and a Flyer, but it was mostly Canadians. And all those guys looked like they were my grandfather, right? Like they just looked like they were 80 years old, right? I mean, when you came in, did you have to deal with when I was a
all
young
the time,
guy,
all the time.
So this is something that is constantly happening
for sure.
Yeah.
You mean, and it's funny, you talk to the guys even with the Flames alumni too, and it's this banter, right? Because like I'm feeling like I'm at the crotchety stage, but then you got guys that have obviously were retired by the time I started playing hockey, and you talk to them, and it's just the transition of the game. I remember going and skating the Malarchuk summer camps, and there was a handful of guys I'd never even heard of that were playing in Europe.
Yeah.
And they would just they would critique me from up one side and down the other. Oh, rust on the blades. Hey kid, if I back when I would have played, that would have blah 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 blah. And headshots off my mask, and just
no. And that's again, I'm really trying to dig deep on, okay, is Mike Babcock bad? Is Daryl Sutter evil? Or, is this just another evolution? Because Anaheim named a coach today, never heard of the guy. Now, I've been out of the media for 4.5 years, and I probably, with a little bit of work, I would have. But there's that Canadian team that won gold over the World Hockey Championships. There's a couple guys I had to look up where they were from.
You need a psychology degree now to be a coach.
Yeah, I think you do. But you probably do to be a teacher. You probably do. It's funny. You mentioned my big complaint, I think we saw it right through COVID, was we don't have leaders anymore.
No,
we have managers.
Well, agreed. And that's very well said, right? There's people in positions that it makes a lot of people uncomfortable to make a decision, right? If you have to decide, there's a consequence, whether it's right or wrong.
Right.
And so the longer you can hold that off and float by, the longer you get to stick around in whatever level of comfort you have.
We all want perfection. What we really need is good.
Exactly. And you have to not be afraid of failure in order to move forward.
See, that's the one thing in this conversation that I wonder about this group of young players. I don't know it. I'm not wondering it as a way of insulting them. I don't know. Are they learning to fail? Part of what I thought was really interesting about a guy that Jonathan Huberdeau was a Wes Gilbertson story, where Wes talked to his former coaches as he was growing up, and they talked about he wanted to play with the bad kids. He wanted to play with the kids the levels below. He thought by making them better, that makes him better. That is so the opposite of every parent in hockey. Oh, my son's got to be the extra forward on the AAA team. He can't be the best player on the double B team. Well, or whatever we call it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just wonder if we have a generation of kids that are again, what we call them, the snowplow parents but even you said something that's really interesting to me now is these kids are getting recruited for spring teams and for quadrant teams and for academies and for junior teams and everything like that. How much real work goes into learning from your failures if somebody's always going to excuse it? Well, it's not your fault. It's that guy's fault.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And I wonder how many teams they haven't made. You know what I mean? Because getting cut sucks. It stings. It hurts.
It's the worst.
It hurts your feelings.
Sure, I've been cut.
I would play in the B team my whole minor hockey. It was B team, B team, B team, B team. But back to the accountability thing though too. Like when I was chatting with a guy on Saturday night that I used to play hockey with, and we were just talking about the passes up the middle. Like you throw a pass up the middle, your butt's stapled to the bench for the rest of the game for a play like that. And good on him.
But you know when it changed for me?
What? Was
Kachuk's first year, and he tried the between the legs. And I remember going, oh, well, good thing Daryl Sutter's not his coach. Little did I know. But, and then the evolution of that was a freaking overtime winner against Nashville.
I know, right? I mean, you have to let them play. Like, don't get me wrong. You have to let them play.
But there's guys that, oh, my God, you turn the puck over.
But not everybody can do it, though. That's the thing. It's not a free-for-all for everybody to try a little sauce pass up the middle.
Football is not a democracy.
Right.
And Dave Dickinson says this all the time, is you can want the same rules for all the players, but there aren't the same.
They're not governed by the same rules.
No.
Not at all.
No.
And that's what people don't understand either, is the fact that, your kid or this kid is better than your kid.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to play more.
Mm-hmm.
How hard is that? Well, but we paid the same money.
Right.
Well, so now it's up to dollars and cents. And I get that. That's a stinger too.
Sure.
But are you in it to?
But if you want, but see, that's a decision that we don't talk enough about. If that equality is important, than play house league.
You're no kidding.
And that's what I played, right? And I'm fine with it. There's nothing wrong with it. But you can't shop around and find the team that's going to make your kid the best player or look at him as the best player. They've got to earn that. And getting cut, it's part of the process.
It is. And because you don't get the role that you want all the time, doesn't mean that you're not meant for the role. It doesn't hurt for you to be a third line checker every once in a while just because you were on the top 2 lines from the team that you came from. Right? It doesn't. There's so many guys that come out of junior that they score major points to get the National Hockey. They're 3rd and 4th line guys.
Yeah.
Right? The top 2 line, for sure, you bide, you wait, you bide your time. I get it.
See what bothers me about junior hockey, and I don't know if you and I've ever had. What bothers me about hockey, let me put it that way. Bothers me when I watch kids under the age of 14 backing up. I don't think kids under 14 should back up.
What do you mean back up?
Back up. Put the equipment on, sit there and do nothing.
Oh, sorry.
Do nothing.
Yeah, backup goalie.
Backup goalie.
Yeah.
Jacob Markstrom.
Yeah.
Tells a great story about playing in Sweden. And he was, until 14, if he was either the starting goalie, the backup, or he skated.
Yeah.
Because they had 3 goalies.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And I think it's absolutely ludicrous that a 12-year-old kid sits and watches another kid play. It doesn't do anybody any good.
No.
And the same thing with young defensemen. When I was in junior A hockey, we're getting a kid who played in the Western League. No, we're getting a kid who spent a year in the Western Hockey League. There's a big difference.
1,000,000%.
Right? And
1,000,000%.
these kids have got to develop. They got to play to develop. So
yes.
I just, that's the part that I wonder if we're not beginning to pay a price for in the system. That we've got these kids who have not failed, right? Who are not grinding it out. I want to ask you, last week it came up and I was pretty harsh on it. What did you think when Alan Walsh came out and spoke on Jonathan Huberdeau's behalf this year?
I thought it was brutal. I thought it was stupid.
Okay.
I thought it was immature. I thought it was, maybe Huberdeau had those conversations internally with the organization.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope he would have himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if your agent has to take the social media to tell you how unhappy he is or how things are wrong with your organization,
mm-hmm.
it's embarrassing. I would be embarrassed. I would feel like I wasn't an adult. I would feel like, I have to have somebody else go talk for me. I'm a professional athlete and my mom and dad are still going to bat for me. It would be embarrassing for me. I thought it was, it made me laugh because I couldn't believe it actually happened. And then when it did, it's like, I guess that's the way it goes now. And that's kind of where I'm at is that where we're at? Because Alan Walsh has done it for countless clients, I know.
Right? He's become very good at it. And the last time I checked, none of those clients ever fired him.
Do you not think that that's the game though? It's like, well, you would think as a player, he would tell the player, hey, I'm going to go on social media here. What do you think? And if they say, no, don't do it. Like, you're in control here. You pay this man. Do you want him to do it or no? If it's yes, then say, yeah, I know what, Alan and I were having a conversation.
But it's always the same thing.
I know.
Alan said, I wish he hadn't said.
It's so the lack of accountability there is gross. Because why would he make it a big spectacle? And then, they make a big deal. Well, I think Huberdeau had a good game, couple games after. Like, it took was Alan Walsh to stir the pot. I think it's a joke.
It's where I'm trying to get in all of this is where are we at right now? Because you had a team that was self-professed dysfunctional. You had a GM that walked away from it. You had a coach that hung around for 2 weeks and then was let go. And now you're starting fresh. And you're likely going to end up with a first-time NHL coach. Is that more important? And then Columbus, who gave that opportunity, is now going back to a guy who was ostracized for 3 or 4 years, and now he's being let back in. But he's, his methods were not universally praised.
No, but it's the accountability thing. And I just, I know, just going back to those Alan Walsh comments, I would have fired the guy. Honestly, it would be,
but none of them ever do.
I know, but that's the problem. It would be embarrassing for me to have to tell dad that I'm unhappy. So please don't talk to my bosses, but indirectly throw it out there. So I have to what is accomplished by it is the fact that you just look like you are, like, I have a word that I have in my mind, but I can't say it.
Well, we just have to tell Ty to stop listening because Ty's the one that doesn't let me swear on the podcast.
Yeah.
So
in a nutshell, great. So you're not accountable. So now what? Now how do you coach players that aren't accountable? You're going to bring an accountable coach. They're just going to get mad, and then they're going to run the table on him, set the ship on fire, and say, "Hey, see, now we want a players coach. Well, now you don't get the results because you're buddy.
Yeah.
And now, oh, that's a country club in here. So let me bring in the other guy again. What's the deal? What do you do?
I don't know.
You know, and that's the thing. It's like, I don't think any one of those coaches, I mean, you have to have the position and that you in the organization, well, with your players, you have to have the respect of your players and the respect of the coach to go in and tell the coach to say, hey, you know what, man, beat it. You know, we're everybody's going here as hard as they can. You can blah, 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 and they can get into it themselves. And there has to be a respect factor. I don't know how much that, I mean, the lack of the team having a captain this year too.
Well, if we didn't have our next guest waiting, we would talk about that, because that's another one that I think played a huge role.
1,000,000% it did.
Yeah. And Warren Peters would have been the best captain.
By far.
Right?
Love that guy.
I appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. I'm glad you could do it. Very excited about Thursday when you're going for a tour with Melissa David.
Yes.
So we're very excited about that. What
Can't
else
wait.
You got going on? Oh, you got a big event next Monday, don't you?
Headwater Learning Academy.
Yep.
Monday.
You're the big honcho.
I'm
You're
the
the
big
cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to get my notes. I was actually supposed to have lunch them today, and I showed up at the Glencoe as opposed to Glencoe Golf and Country Club. So I missed my luncheon.
Hoity, holy cow.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't know you were that kind of guy.
It's crazy.
You're running with some pretty cool.
I'm a
crap.
bit of a big wheel.
I'm
not
big
sure if
wheel
I've
down the
told
old
you that
cheese
before
cracker
not.
or
Yeah.
the factory.
Yeah.
At the cracker factory. You're a big wheel.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Croner.
Hey, appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Brent Krahn joining us, everybody. Jack, can you do me a favor? Can you go over and grab my bag? Because that's where all my liners are. You know, the important liners that we have to read during the show. But I can't tell you, Brent, of course, joining us courtesy of our good friends at Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary. 4 locations in the winter. Yep. 1 location in the summer. That's the one on McLeod Trail. And as well, right now, you can check out the off season. There's some deals there to be had, always some deals there to be had, but we couldn't thank Neil and the gang enough for their support of this program. So when you're going skiing, when you're going snowboarding, you check out Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.ca. We are live in the Oodle Noodle studio, bringing the heat as we always do, just like Oodle Noodle does. And they have 2 locations in Calgary, 1244 17th Avenue Southwest, 105 Main Street North in Airdrie, pickup and delivery at both locations. So I'm still behind because we started the show. We went right in with Brent because I was asked to. But I have to do another read on another thing. But I want to bring in our next guest because he can help me. Very excited that Ryan Pike can join us and spend a little time. Ryan, this Saturday, do you know what's happening?
I believe it's UFC 289 in Vancouver.
It is UFC 289 in Vancouver. Nunez and Aldana. It's the first time in 4 years that the UFC has been back in Canada. There are 6 Canadians on the card, but the headline is a pretty big fight. Would you not agree?
I mean, Amanda Nunes is a terrifying human being in the best way possible. So, yeah, I think anytime you have a championship fight or just Amanda Nunes fighting in general, it's pretty big.
I would say so. Of course, it's available on pay-per-view and where you go to enjoy your UFC match. And as I said, did you realize 6 Canadians on the card? That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And, you know, they haven't been back to Western Canada for various reasons in a while. And so it's going to be exciting. I think, British Columbia especially has such a vibrant MMA community, and getting us, for so many of these good young fighters who have basically been sort of topped out with how they can compete until UFC came back to Western Canada. It's going to be exciting to see some fresh faces get some big exposure.
You'll be taking this in?
Perhaps. I have a lot of things going on this weekend and a lot of things going on lately.
This, obviously, UFC 289, Nunez and Aldana. Great to see you. It's been a while. Last week.
You were away and I was away.
I wasn't really away. I just wasn't doing my job. You were away because you earned a vacation. Now, you got to Vegas before everybody else did, right?
I was in town the night of, I believe it was Game 5. They had a chance to eliminate Florida, or eliminate
Dallas.
not Florida, Dallas, yeah. And yeah, so I was there for other reasons, but it happened to coincide with the event. So I went down and checked out Toshiba Plaza, checked out the festivities and stuff, and then I went to a dinner. So it was kind of cool. It's if you ever have a chance to go to a game in Vegas, or even just wander around in the festivities before the game, it's a sight to behold. They put on a good show even before the show.
I noticed, and you and I are both big EDM guys, but apparently somebody named Marshmello was playing before Saturday. So he has a big hat, and he's got eyes on his hat. It seemed like a very big deal.
Evidently so. I mean, it's it falls out of my wheelhouse, but the kids seem to like it.
The kids seem to like it. Speaking of which, how many times did you visit Steak Shack?
I only went to Shake Shack once. I was
Shake
really
Shack.
proud of myself. The boys at FlamesNation were telling me that I had to go check out the Taco Bell Cantina, but my schedule just didn't align that way.
When you have to go to Vegas and do all this work, you poor SOB, you should have been given a little leeway. Somebody should have allowed you a day or two just to explore. Because I don't know if you've been, but Vegas is a fun place.
Yeah, it's it's one of those places. It was kind of fun. A friend of mine worked for the Raiders and really heavily recommended going to check out the stadium. So I did a stadium tour of Allegiant Stadium, and they spent some money on that thing. But when you wander through it, you go, okay, I can see them spending a couple billion on this, and they didn't cut corners. It's one of those things where if you're gonna do a stadium to lure a team away from Oakland, you better make it nice, and they made it nice.
And baseball's coming. I don't know if you heard.
Yeah, allegedly, if they can figure out the funding for it. I mean, and I think the big challenge there is, I mean, for those of you not familiar with Las Vegas geography, T-Mobile Arena, where the Golden Knights play, is just off the Strip. You access it via the Strip, but it's between the old Monte Carlo, now called Park MGM, and New York. And so it's a nice spot. It's very central, easy to get to. There's nowhere to park a damn car, but you deal with it. A lot of people just park at casinos, pay the fee, and then wander over, which, necessary evil, I suppose. Allegiant Stadium is located, they have parking, but it's located sort of on the other side of the interstate, on the south end of the Strip. And they want to put the new stadium for the soon-to-be Las Vegas Athletics, or whatever the hell they're going to call them, on the south end of the Strip, basically where the Tropicana is. And the challenge there is, it's not a giant lot, and there's going to be no damn parking, and traffic at that intersection of Tropicana and Las Vegas Boulevard sucks. And the parking and or driving on the Strip in general sucks. So they're asking for a not insubstantial amount of money to add to the existing traffic woes in an already traffic congested area. So I will say good luck to them. I mean, it'd be cool to sort of have another really cool thing in that area. I mean, F1's coming. They have, any number of things. The NBA is rumored to be heading there at some point. So, I mean, good for them, but they're going to have to figure out a way to solve a few problems that they've already created by putting all this stuff just in a very compact area.
Speaking of solving problems, compacted areas and parking, I believe the arena or the event center was on the docket for city council today. Did we have much news?
Not really. I mean, a lot of it was just a presentation about things that we already knew about. A lot of, discussion of cash flow stuff, things like that. They're working on the contracts as we speak, and they're hoping to have those things all sort of set up. They're hoping, quote, in a few months, which could really mean anything. My guess is we hear an update on the contract sometime in September, maybe October, depending. But they have a lot of people working on this stuff in the background. I think this is something that, a lot of people have been spending the bulk of their working hours on at City Hall for the better part of the last decade. And bless their hearts, I think they're all going to be very excited to work on something else for a little while.
Sure.
But, they still have probably, realistically, if all goes well, I mean, the province won't be able to sign off on their stuff until the money's in place. The money won't be in place until, I believe, their cabinet and then Treasury has to approve it, which will probably be a rubber stamp because they have a majority government. But that'll be done in August, at which point then they can finally actually execute the contracts. But the work can be done on preparing the contracts. They can do everything but sign before the money's in place. But it's going to be a lot of those kind of things where they're not going to have a lot to tell us until the contracts are all done. So we won't be able to get much of an update substantively until probably September-ish.
Did I not see that there is some discussion of a mechanism for cost overruns that was a bit of a bugaboo the last go round?
It's 50-50.
Okay.
Between CSEC and the city.
Okay.
But evidently, I believe it was the city manager, either the city manager or the city general manager, both of them spoke. But it was one of the city representatives mentioned at today's meeting that, they basically built some contingencies into the numbers that we have. So the 1.223 billion, any number that includes a B better include contingencies. And, they've included some contingencies, but this is, the case is that, CSEC's putting up 40 million up front, and the bulk of the rest of the money, better part of $800 million, is being fronted by the city. And then the CSEC's lease payments, the $17 million a year, and escalating 1% a year after that, that's all being fronted by the city and, covered by the money they have in place, and then working capital funds. So, it's the city taking on a decent amount of upfront risk, and then CSEC is taking on, they're tied to a 35-year lease. So, if they're, I'll say this, the $17 million a year lease payments give CSEC an incentive to start getting this thing going and make it profitable pretty early on, because, you got to, event management and event promotion is very competitive in North America, and you got to establish yourself quickly, because, once you get going there, you're going to owe some money to the city right away. Yep. And, if you can figure out a way to get going and do it well early on, then you can have a pretty profitable business. And if you can't, then you're still on the hook for the money woe. And, so I guess that's sort of the downside risk for CSEC in the long term. But I don't know. It's one of those things where you hope that everyone feels like the risk is spread out as, as close to 50-50 as you can, because, if it's not spread out, then one side will end up being pretty unhappy with the deal.
I'll ask you one question, and you might just not be able to answer it, and that's okay. We'll move on. But we are a week away removed from the election. From your contacts and what you heard, was this much of a factor in polling? Did it really resonate as an election issue?
Not really. I mean, I think people who, I'll say this, Rachel Notley had every opportunity to gain political points by coming out vehemently against it and saying no public money for billionaires. And, we've heard, there's various people, political stripes have done that in the past in various municipalities. That didn't happen here. In fact, that, it was the worst she said was, we need more details. And then when they released their costed campaign platform later on, it included money for the arena and also some matching funds for a project in Edmonton that they hadn't figured out yet. It's sort of we want to make it fair to Edmonton, so we'll throw something in there too, which is going to end up happening for this provincial government anyway. So, it was a choice between one group to propose to give money to this project and another group that said, oh, yeah, sure, well, we're not against it. So I don't think it ended up being a wedge issue at all, actually.
Okay. No, I just never felt that way to me. That's why I thought I'd ask you if you were, I thought, oh, well, okay, we know what the election's going to be about. Just didn't seem to resonate. Let's work backwards with the local hockey heroes. We'll get back to the GM in a second, but he's already been busy. Combine this week in Buffalo. We expect it. There'll be more second round, whatever we want to call it, or the next round of coaches interviews, but also the viewing and testing and interviewing of potential prospects. But last week there was some work to be done, which was was it 5 players to potentially qualify?
5 players.
They chose to qualify none.
That is correct. Lucas Folk was a 4th round pick in 2019. He was a guy that sort of bounced around secondary and tertiary Swedish pro, and then they brought him over here on an AHL deal to basically go, well, if we're not going to sign the guy, let's at least bring him in and see what he can do. And he spent most of the year, I think all the year, with Rapid City, and was, he was fine, but I don't think you sign guys who were fine in the ECHL, and that was the decision they came to as well. The other 4 are all 2021 picks. That was the very weird year. That was the year where it was hard for scouts to travel, and some leagues just didn't play. The OHL didn't play. Jack Beck did not have a draft year, and then he came in and he played 2 pretty decent seasons. But Jack Beck, kind of a smallish offensive forward, and he had a couple gnarly injuries. He had a kidney contusion, which if you Google it, sounds really bad. It basically means your kidney is bruised and won't stop bleeding, which does not sound fun at all. And then he had, I believe, a suspected concussion. The term that was used by the team was upper body injury, but he got hit in the head. So, I mean, could have been a concussion, could have been something else. But, the Flames right now have Rory Kerrans, who, was a really small, he was another smallish offensive OHL forward that they signed. He had I believe the year he was signed, he was, I think, top 5 in OHL scoring that year. They signed him, sent him to, he went in the farm system, and he spent the majority of last year in the ECHL with Rapid City because of the numbers game. And, when, a guy who hits 3 figures for points is sort of, stuck in the ECHL mire for much of the year, it doesn't really make you have a lot of confidence in signing a guy that was just over a point a game. So I think that probably factored into it too. Who else? Cam Wynot, defenseman at Halifax. Another guy that sort of struggled to stay healthy, so he didn't really have a large enough sample size for you to figure out what the hell he was. Cole Huckins played. He was drafted out of Acadie Bathurst, but got traded to Sherbrooke. He spent the year as sort of a secondary offensive guy in Sherbrooke this year. Good, but not great offensive numbers. Sort of consistency was considered one of the challenges with him this year. And so, again, it was sort of a question of what the hell is he at the pro level? And the answer was they weren't really sure, I think. And so they ended up not signing him. And the final one, Cole Jordan out of Moose Jaw. When he was drafted, WHL scouts I talked to loved the kid's intangibles. Great skater, good mobility, good head for the game. Another guy that just could not stay healthy. He was, basically shut down for the year, I believe in December of this year with an injury. He had an injury the year before that basically wiped out half of his season. So, this was the cursed draft year. In addition to not having the same looks you would normally get at these guys in their draft year, all 4 of the guys from the 21 class that they didn't sign, had absences from the lineup for various reasons that really made it difficult to get a good handle on how they're progressing and what they could progress into. And so, back to the drawing board. Folk is now going to be a UFA. He can be signed by anyone, and the other 4 guys are going back into the pool for this year's draft class. We'll see what happens. I can see Jack Beck getting picked up by someone who has an extra 7th or 6th round pick, because I think there's some potential there, and he seems like the kind of guy, though, that you would try to sign to like an AHL deal and say, okay, go nuts, because I just think that, especially now with how competitive things are. I mean, now that the Flames have the last 2 seasons established that they have a really strong AHL program, and they've seen, the benefits to development of having a really strong AHL program, you're sort of tied to that. You can't really, let yourself have your AHL program have a step back. And so one of the consequences of that is some of the guys that you're sort of borderline on, maybe, you opt for more sure thing depth guys. I mean, Ben Jones is a good example where 3-4 years ago, the Flames might not have signed Ben Jones, but, because 23, 24-year-old guy who maybe just a quad A guy, but maybe 5 years ago, they go, we'll sign a guy out of the OHL because maybe he has upside. Ben Jones might not have more upside than he has right now, but Ben Jones is a very good AHLer, and having a very good AHLer helped sort of bring up the games of the guys playing with him. So it's kind of a different developmental mindset. And I don't know if there's either a good nor bad to it. They all have have their benefits, but yeah, it's, I know some folks social media folks were very disappointed on no Jack Beck. And I don't know. I like Jack Beck, good player. I don't know if I would have signed him given the same circumstances too, because, you just don't know what he is right now.
Yeah. I thought it was a little early to start making evaluations on the new general manager based on that, but here we are. That's the beauty of social media. Coach, you hear things. I'm still stuck where, for whatever reason, I got Hulsa. I've got Husk in my head. It's just, I don't know why, but it just sticks there. We had the great conversations about who you would talk to in the general manager case. What about as a coach? Where are you looking? What are you thinking?
Honestly, right now, I'm thinking they go internal. It feels like they're going internal. They're paying a head coach $4 million for the next 2 years to not coach for them. And, I think the big challenge is, I think you kind of have a sense of how Love, Muller, or Huska would engage with the group they have now. I think, especially with, you have a general manager that, his sort of the social butterfly of all the general managers. Of all the candidates they have, or they probably looked at for GM, he's the guy who probably knows the personalities on the NHL roster the best. And, also being not too far removed from being a player himself, would have an idea of what type of personality would be able to engage with and maximize the guys they have. And so that's why I'm kind of thinking, because he knows the players pretty well and he knows the dynamics pretty well, he probably would opt to hire a coach they know pretty well. And, I'm kind of like you. I'm thinking it's Husk or Love. I really respect Kirk Muller as a coach, but he's also, bless his heart, the Flames power play was not good this year. And if they were league average, they'd probably make the playoffs. And so it was a circumstance where the area he was responsible for, the forwards and the power play, end up being less than the sum of their parts. And so I'd probably lean against giving him a bigger opportunity, unfortunately. Whereas with Ryan Huska, his penalty kill, even if the Flames were sort of all over the place elsewhere, the defensive group, despite losing, Chris Tanev was playing below 100% much of the year. They missed Stone for much of the year. They had no Shillington all year. They sort of were figuring out Mackenzie Weegar as the season went on. But if you look at how that defensive group evolved from game 1 to game 82, given the circumstances, given the guys they did and didn't have at their disposal, and looking at how the penalty kill really worked, even with them bringing bodies in and out of the lineup, moving guys up and down, like they had a lot of different people engaged in that situation. But the penalty kill was probably the part of the organization, part of the game that worked the most consistently. And those are Ryan Huska's babies. And so if you're looking at sort of, the performance-based metrics, you probably point to the AHL head coach and the guy doing the NHL power or penalty kill and PK or a defensive group as the guys you probably go, maybe those guys. So I don't know. We'll see. It sounds like they're down to short strokes on this. And I imagine, with everything going on this week, they probably would like to have everything come to a resolution in the next week or so, just so they could really draw their focus to A, building out a coaching staff, and B, just drilling down on their, on all the other things. I mean, you need, the big question of the summer is Elias Lindholm going to be a Flame
exactly
in the next year or two? And the answer, if I'm Elias Lindholm's representation, I go, depends. Who's the coach?
Yep.
Because, you need to know if you're going to have a chance to do something here. So this is the first domino that's going to fall, and it's probably going to fall, I'd say, reasonably soon, the next week or so. And then after that, a lot of other things will happen. And, we don't even know what the cap number is going to be yet. So this is the next 3 weeks, I think, are going to be some of those fascinating 3 weeks in club history, recent club history, at least, because this thing could turn in any number of directions based on who they hire, what guys react to when they who gets hired, other announcements they might have. There's the perpetual rumor that Jerome McGinley is going to join the coaching staff. And based on the people who are saying it, I don't think he's joining the coaching staff. I think he's probably going to come in as a consultant of some kind. Mm-hmm. But, you probably have that kind of announcement coming up, and I think that'll make people happy. But there's a lot of things swirling around that could fall in certain ways over the next few weeks to make the Flames a very attractive place to play. And there's some things that, depending on who you hire, could make it a little bit less attractive. So, it's going to be fascinating, man.
Is it either or in the sense of Huska and Love? If you hire Huska, does that mean you're automatically going to lose Love? If you go with Love, does that mean Huska leaves? Huska did, interviewed with Detroit last year, and I'm sure his focus is here right now. But, are you going to eventually be recruiting as well for a head coach in the American Hockey League?
That's a good question. And I think the challenge is, much like if you're a player, like say, if you're a young player and you sign with the Flames, you want to know, what's the plan for me? Like say, I'm sure Matthew Phillips is sort of sitting around going, so what's the plan, guys? I mean, because he has options. And, we know Mitch Love will have options. We know Ryan Huska has had options very recently. And I can't imagine that Ryan Huska's stock has dipped. He's probably, being a face of calm in the hurricane that was the Flames of the past year probably makes Ryan Huska a more attractive candidate elsewhere too. And so if I'm one of those guys, if you come to me and say, hey, it's not you, do you want to stay? My question is why? Like, what's this plan for me? And because I think Ryan Huska in this organization has probably done everything he can do outside of be a head coach. If you're Mitch Love, if they say, hey, we want you to be an AHL assistant, you want to work with Ryan Huska, my question, if I'm him, is what's the plan here? because you know if you're a head coach, especially these guys, you know they keep their ears to the ground. They kind of know what's going on in their organization and others. You know, you want to know that you're gonna have a chance, and you know maybe not. Part of me thinks it is probably one or the other because there's enough other teams, you know, doing coaching hires or looking for guys that you know you probably are end up hiring for another role depending on who you get.
Yeah, you know, it kind of Spencer Carberry last week with Washington kind of in many ways sparked some conversations around Mitch Love because he was that guy that not that long ago, right? That head coach in the American Hockey League that a lot of people and I posed the question and it was countered beautifully because to me, if you want to be a head coach, then be a head coach. If you're going to go be an assistant coach, does that do you any value? But I believe it was Eric Dahachek who countered with, yeah, but it gets you in the NHL. You see the travel, you see the buildings, you see the life, you get up to speed. There's value in going up and being on that staff and seeing that yes, while being a head coach and making all the decisions, sure, that's important. But having that exposure to the life in the NHL will benefit a young coach.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that's one of the things. I think one of the most challenging things to do in an organization, though, is go from being the NHL assistant to the NHL head coach because you know it's a completely different relationship and a completely different mindset. Mm-hmm. And you know we've seen like Jim Playfair was a fantastic assistant coach in the NHL, and then you know he got promoted to replace Daryl Sutter, and it just didn't work. It didn't click in the way that it had in other places. But there have been cases. I mean, historically, if you look at some of the best Flames head coaches, some of the best Flames head coaches have been the guys they brought up from the AHL, and sometimes it works really well, and sometimes again, you know, you don't have credibility. And I think that's the big challenge. I think figuring out, you know, that's probably the secret sauce of it all. Figuring out who's going to have credibility with that locker room, with that group to say, guys, here's what we're doing. Because, you know, there's often times where, you know, I think a lot of guys like Glenn Gulletson, I think was one guy that when he came in, he, you know, at times had credibility problems with the locker room. And so, you know, he had that famous, the stick throwing thing where I think, you know, there was a period of frustration, both, you know, amongst the players and amongst the coaching staff because things weren't going the way they thought. I wasn't there that day, but it was just some brilliant theater.
Well, it was, but it also felt in a way, it felt forced.
Yeah, it was.
You know what I mean?
It was obviously for show. Sure. But I mean, you know, it's like anything else. I mean, you only do that when you've tried other things and they didn't really work. That's so. Right. But I think that's, you know, we've all worked in various places, you know, Rob, in your career, my career, mm-hmm. We've worked with people who are, you know, I'll say this, like some of the best writers don't make the best editors. And unfortunately that's where sometimes they throw you, it's a completely different skill set. And I think that's sort of the same mindset in terms of being an assistant coach and being a head coach. I mean, Ryan Huska is a fantastic tactical penalty killing coach. Would he be good at running a bench at the NHL level? I have no idea. Was he great at running a bench at the AHL level? He was pretty good, but the mindset at that point was, you know, Ryan, we want you to produce NHL players, and we don't particularly care if you win or lose. And he was given that mindset, and he was given those marching orders, and he succeeded. So I don't think he was trying to win less than he did, but the marching orders, I think the marching orders from Mitch Love were a lot different than the marching orders they gave Cale McLean or they gave Ryan Huska. And so, you know, I think that's why I think it's difficult to really, you know, people are, I've seen this kind of chatter around going, oh, they should hire Mitch Love because Mitch Love is a better AHL head coach than Ryan Huska was. And my answer to that is, I don't know if you can necessarily conclude that because the jobs were basically defined differently at that point. Which is to say, I don't know which one of the two they would hire if it was a choice between the two, because I think they're both exceptionally smart hockey people, and they do things in such completely different ways that I think either guy would potentially have success if he surrounded himself with the right coaching staff.
Why hasn't anybody brought up Cale McLean's name?
I don't know. I mean, it's because he's not on the bench as often. He's the eye in the sky guy. So he's the tactical change guy. He's the watch out for the forecheck guy. And he's, you know, dating back to when he was in the AHL, he's always had a really good knack for sort of tactics and sort of breaking this stuff down. And I think he's really well suited to the job he has. I would be really curious to see if after whatever coaching changes happen, if he ends up with a bigger role, because I think, you know, he's role. Yeah, like I you know, because I think he's been utilized well, but I think he also has a lot of potential to be utilized in a larger way.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Let's take a look at a couple things that are connected that happened that we haven't had a chance to talk about. Kyle Dubas is in Pittsburgh, but now he's the president of hockey operations, and Brad Treliving's the 18th general manager in Toronto. Craig, obviously we know about that story, but tell me about Toronto. Tell me about Pittsburgh. What surprises you or doesn't surprise you about those two hires?
Honestly, they both kind of make sense to me. I mean, I've had the opportunity to get to know Brad Treliving over the last decade reasonably well. I have a lot of respect for him. I think, it takes a lot of balls to walk away from it. Like, he had a contract waiting for him here.
Yep.
It takes some backbone to say, no, thanks, I'll try something else. Because this is the situation he knows. Like, he knows all the media people, he knows all the players, he knows the owner's expectations, and it takes a lot of backbone to just go, nah, I'm going to do my own thing. It also takes a lot of backbone to willingly choose Toronto because, yeah, it's the Leafs. It's the show. In Canada, I can't imagine outside of maybe Montreal if there's a more pressure-packed environment for a player or executive or coach than Toronto. It's just, if you succeed in Toronto, it's great. If you do anything but, you're a pariah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to get a sense of that, look at some of the fan reaction to Kyle Dubas departing. So Treliving, I think he went into this with eyes open, and I think he kind of had a feeling. My guess is that there might be openings elsewhere, and I think he fits really well for how Toronto wants to go because they're in win now mode, and that's been the mindset that Calgary's had for the last few years, and I think he's used to that kind of mindset and that kind of pressure. And now the question will be, can he figure out a way to ice a team that fits under the salary cap? I'm sure Brent Krahn and his crew will do their level best to keep them below, but I don't think there's been a team that has had more cap juggling to do over the last few years than Toronto, or B, has found a way to succeed. Like, they've dressed U Sports goaltenders multiple times in the last season or two because they had no damn money, and they've still managed to succeed in the regular season. And on one hand, it's terrifying that they had to do that. On the other hand, you got to respect the audacity of spending all your cap space like that, because you only do that if you're confident in the guys you have.
I want to ask you a kind of a nuclear winter question. And I guess the new thing in sports talk radio is when you do this, you got to qualify it by, this isn't news. Don't tweet that we're talking about. No, I'm just asking. To get cap space, you have to move one of the big four, right? That's in Toronto. That's the most efficient way to do it.
Okay. So there's other ways to do it. I mean, you can, let's go this way. Like, here, in Calgary, you're looking at ideas for opening a cap space, and the ideas is lobbed around is like, oh, you just trade a defenseman, and then you simply bring in a slightly less expensive defenseman. I mean, you can do that if you're up against the salary cap. If you could rearrange the deck chairs,
sure, and
just sort of do money in, money out moves, or you can blow a hole in the side of the ship and then move out one of your big guys. But I think that's always going to be the thing they talk about in Toronto, because until those big four lead them to a parade, I think the first suggestion every offseason is going to be, oh, they got to move one of those guys because that's the easiest way to shake up the team. And it would be, but would that shake up the team in the way they really want to? Because I would argue the biggest challenge the Leafs had in the postseason was, not surrendering goals. I think if they were a little bit better defensively or a little bit better in net, then I don't think we're having that conversation. I think we're having a completely different conversation. But it's the same kind of thing we talk about when you think about the Edmonton Oilers, where it's like, oh, they're putting so much money between Nugent Hopkins and Draisaitl and that McDavid guy. Oh, they need to get better defensively. Well, yeah, of course they do. Because, they're at a position where they weren't able to outscore their defensive mistakes. That was the situation in Toronto. And I think Toronto, because they have a big four rather than a big two or a big three, it gives them a little bit more wiggle room to figure out ways to, work around their mistakes. I just think the challenge is with that defensive group they had, and, poor Mark Giordano finally almost looking his age. I think the big challenge is that the guys they have invested in haven't really panned out on the blue line exactly the way they hoped.
So if he goes down to Arizona, he being Brad Treliving, goes down to Arizona, talks to Austin Matthews, and Austin Matthews hesitates in the slightest. He gets the same inkling that he got at the end towards Gaudreau and Tkachuk. And he is forced to trade Austin Matthews at the draft this year, what would the fallout of that be? Because Nylander's been the kind of the whipping boy, right? Like you can get rid of Nylander. Go ahead and get rid of Nylander. And then Tavares is the 2 years of the really expensive contract. The guy they want to keep is Matthews long term. But Tree Living, Conroy, everybody talks about the lesson they learned in Goudreau. So you'd have to think that if he gets any kind of signal from Austin Matthews that he doesn't want to sign long term, he's going to move him, right?
Probably, but I don't know if he rushes out and does it by the draft. I think.
Oh, okay.
I think the draft is a great opportunity to do it, but I think the draft is also an opportunity. Like, let's this way, I still think that the trade that the Flames made and Florida made with Matthew Tkachuk was a good trade for both teams. They both got what they needed.
A hockey trade.
Yeah, it was a hockey trade, and I think especially with the right now the inkling is that barring some deal between the NHL and NHLPA. And as an aside, I think Gary Bettman's comments that the cap's only going up $1 million is as much a negotiating ploy with him and the NHLPA as it is anything else. But if nothing happens, the cap's only going up $1 million.
Yep.
So you're going to have a lot of teams that are sort of up against it. So you're almost going to have to see, a money in, money out trade or some sort of a hockey trade, the way the Flames made, the way Florida made, the way, some other teams have tried to make. And I think that opens up a lot of opportunities because, I think if you talk to Matthews right now, if we go down, sit down with him, have dinner and say, what do you want to do? And he goes, maybe I want to try something else. If he tells you that, you go, where do you want to go? And then give me some names, give me a list and give me some time to get the price up. And then, you want to put him, I think that especially in a cap world where it's more and more difficult, like you can't, most teams can't afford to throw stupid money at players. They can afford to throw respectable money at players. They can throw, market specific numbers at players. But like say, Matthew Tkachuk was probably going to make similar money no matter where he went because of the contract comparables. Yep. And so, how you treat players determines how many players consider you. If you have a reputation for being a good place to play, a good ownership group, a good management group, good coaching staff, good support staff, good whatever, people who are sort of on the fence will go, hey, I know so-and-so, they played in Calgary. They said that it was a fun place to play. They had a good time. Let's go. And, if you have that reputation, you can get guys. And I think part of that is when you have situations like this, I mean, Brent Krahn very much when Matthew Tkachuk said, I don't know if I want to stay long term, Brent Krahn was very much within his right to say tough shit and just park him. Oh, yeah. And it could have turned really contentious. And some managers would have done it that way. Mm-hmm. But I think both for how True Living's going to be dealt with in Toronto and how the Flames are going to be dealt with long term, I think it helps to be known as someone who's willing to do business. And if you talk to Matthews and he goes, I don't know, I think the next question you have for him is, where do you want to be? And if the answer is not Toronto, if he gives you some names, gives you some things, you can spend the summer getting him a good landing spot, getting him a spot where he wants to be and facilitating that. And I think if you are able to figure that stuff out, you can get some stuff from him. You can get some stuff for him. And I think the same product conversation will be happening with the Flames and Elias Lindholm once they get a coach in place, because if the answer is, where do you want to be? Not Calgary. Okay, what do you want to be? Where can we put you? Where can we put you that you'll be happy? And I think especially, it's been a flat cap the last few years. This might be the last year of the flat cap.
Yep.
And then the deluge of money opens up next year. And I think more and more that'll make, reputation will matter as everyone gets a bit of money to spend.
And for the record, I was just asking a question of a process, which you answered beautifully. I think Matthew stays in Toronto. I'm not.
I think he does too, because I think he's a hockey guy. He's a when you listen to him speak, he seems like a giant nerd. And I mean that in the best way possible.
Oh, but about the sport.
Yeah. Like he sounds like someone who, it's winning, if you win in Toronto, I think you cement yourself as someone who will be beloved forever. I mean, Cliff Fletcher, granted, Cliff Fletcher is a legend because he did a lot of great things before he got to Toronto. Cliff Fletcher goes to Toronto. If he wins. Maybe he's in the Hall of Fame twice. I don't know.
No, but I again, they'll print your face on money.
Yeah,
you
though
get-
you could run for prime minister
100%.
if you get the Leafs into a final, let alone win it.
100%. Speaking of final, one game in, Vegas with a win. I mean, it was tied in the third period. I don't know how much weight that carries, but it was tied in the third period. Vegas, though, takes game one, game two going tonight. I'm not asking for anything other than a thought, I guess, on game one.
I'll say this. Whew, man, that unraveled quickly, didn't it? But Vegas has the ability to do that. They have, a team full of really smart, really skilled players. They're well coached. They have depth everywhere. They're getting good and occasionally very good goaltending.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the ability, like they have that confidence on home ice that few other teams have. I mean, the running joke is the house always wins because they have that great home record. And the Vegas flu necessarily might be a thing of the past, but it's still like a loud, obnoxiously energetic place to play.
Yep.
And in a close game, if you're just paying more attention to the obscene chants or the loudness than you are to what's going on the ice, the margins are so thin that having the home crowd on you might make a difference. And I think to a certain extent, it made a difference in game one.
Yeah, I expect a different Florida tonight, but we will see. What do we got going on? Because again, for some reason, you just choose not to slow down at FlamesNation. What's going on as we head towards the draft?
Yeah, well, we're continuing our first round target series, looking at a bunch of different players the Flames could select at 16. I've already looked at a lot of players. Matthew Wood from the University of Connecticut, who's played on a team that Yan Kuznetsov came from, played at a team that Arseny Sergayev is currently playing for. But we had some other ones, and then we're going to delve into, as we get closer to the draft, some of the second and fourth round targets. So, there's a lot of names out there that really seem to fit the bill the Flames have been going on. But I think the fun X factor right now is, are we assuming the Flames are going to draft sort of for the same qualities under Craig Conroy that they did under Brad Living? I think for this season, probably, because, their marching orders were from Brad for the things that Brad valued. But I think, probably after this season, we're going to see some tweaks. But for right now, I mean, it's a bit of an exercise in guesswork, more so than usual. But that's kind of what makes the draft fun. I mean, it's one of those events that is really exciting because I think you and I have joked about it. It's for 220 some players, it's the best day of their lives. And it's the day where all the teams are undefeated, and it's the great reset button for everybody, and everybody's got hope. And then they go into free agency, everyone's excited, and then everyone's going to be filled with hope until that second week of October, where everyone starts feeling a little bit down.
Yep. There we go. Could they take another college forward? Yes, they could. Technically, they can, right? And it could be this guy, Matthew Wood.
Right shot forward. Seems like something the Flames always need, huh?
Can never have enough, right?
Hey, he scores goals, and there's one thing that I believe is important in hockey. This is a controversial statement. The team that wins the games tends to score more than the other team.
They do indeed. Thank you, my friend. We will catch up with you next week. Thanks for doing this.
Take care.
There you go. Ryan Pike, the managing editor of FlamesNation, our guest, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com, 76 years in Calgary. Visit them, McLeod Trail by Chinook Center. Then again, when ski season starts, they'll open up the other 3 locations. So game 2 tonight, a couple things because we just jumped on with Krahn right at the beginning. Quebec winning the Memorial Cup, 6-0 over Seattle. Patrick Waugh's club made it look real easy. The big question now is, where does Patrick Waugh go? And if you're that type of person, and I am not that type of person now, the Western League struggling to win Memorial Cups, the Quebec League can't be stopped. What do we do? Should we have a summit? Should we have a Western Hockey Summit? I'll pass. Thank you. Series in the NBA is tied at a game apiece. Miami winning on the road 111-108 over Denver. So that shifts back on Wednesday to Miami. The Blue Jays sweeping the Mets 6-4 was the win yesterday. So they took 3 games. And then we are on the cusp of the beginning of the CFL season. We are on the cusp of the beginning of the CFL season. BC at Calgary on Thursday. Can I say that or not yet? Not yet? Can I say
Not
it?
yet.
Okay. I will not say it. Jack says I can't say it. I want to, really want to. Not yet. By the way, though, Saturday, you better have plans for this. UFC 289, Nunez and Aldana, for the first time in almost 4 years, UFC is back in Canada at Vancouver's Rogers Arena this Saturday. The card is stacked. Look at the top end. You're going to have at least one of the best that ever did it in Nunez competing. The lightweight bout, nothing to smirk at. But what I love, 6 Canadians on the card. So lots of Canadian content, lots of reasons to be excited about it. UFC 289, Nunez versus Aldana at Vancouver's Rogers Arena, Saturday, June 10th. Check it out on pay-per-view. Or if you're like me, you go down to your favorite watering hole and you watch it there. That's how I partake in my UFC. Let's hit to the final mile. A couple things. Goodbye. Thank you. Calgary says goodbye to Bob Niven, who passed away a couple of days ago. One of the huge pieces in the 88 bid. Again, Bob Niven's work in Calgary, not only in sport, but with Special Olympics. He was a builder. When we started the program back in February, and I was on my soapbox about heroes and the city needing visionaries, it's gentlemen like Bob Niven and King, and the likes that really saw us to that great, which defined our city in so many ways. So we say goodbye to Bob Niven, and those who know him and love him will appreciate the fact that he's got a mark that will never, ever, ever wash away from the city. And just have to do this. How about one-time Flame prospect, and I believe maybe the most popular player outside of Craig Conroy I've ever seen, Pete Vandermeer. He is going to pick up the Distinguished Member Award from the 2023 Professional Hockey Players Association's annual meeting of player representatives. Pete, one of the toughest guys you'll ever meet, was a career minor leaguer, was everybody's favorite teammate because he took care of them, but he also did the work as a distinguished member in the Professional Hockey Players Association, fighting for the rights of American Hockey League players and ECHL players. Pete's up in Central Alberta. The family are still a going concern in all matters hockey up there. And every once in a while, I get the opportunity and the pleasure of bumping into him. But just one of my favorites, Pete Vandermeer. If you ever met him, ever golfed with him, as long as you didn't have to fight him, I think you'd like him. I really do. I think he'd be one of your favorites. A couple more shows this week. We're going to talk some basketball on Wednesday. Nelson Taroba, the head coach of the Calgary Surge, they're at home on Friday. Nelson's going to join us. We'll talk to the coach, and I'm actually going to bring up a little bit of what I talked about today with Krahn about young players. And speaking of which, I keep bringing up her name, talked briefly with her here, I believe this morning. We are going to get Carla McLeod on the podcast here in the coming weeks, so looking forward to that. So lots to do, lots to talk about. The CFL, I still no? Okay, can't say nothing about that. But it's good. It is good. Thanks to Brent Krahn. Thanks to Ryan Pike. Oh, good Lord. I didn't even do a full 2-hour show, and I'm punchy. Thanks to our outstanding producers, Jack and RJ, for doing another great job. Back here with you on Thursday. Note the start time of Barn Burner, by the way, guys. Now 10 o'clock in the morning. So 10 o'clock. So make sure you're adjusting appropriately and not joining halfway in, because if you're like me and you join that show halfway and you don't have a clue what they're talking about, honest to God, it's just a joke. It's too much. No, they're great. All right. We'll see you Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.
When there's two sides to every coin, then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks, and some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the shake my fist at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you